boldness and questioning of received wisdom, I guess, would be trademarks of yours.
Yes.
How come then, and you say yes, how come you've suspended those trademarks, seems to me, when you make your films about leaders, Fidel Castro, Hugo Chavez, leaders who you clearly admire and you seem to suspend your critical faculties for?
No, I went back and I saw Fidel on a second documentary called Looking for Fidel. I hope you have a chance to see it. I asked him probably the toughest questions that any journalist has ever sat down and asked him. It's a great documentary, and I asked him about human rights abuses. I go through it. We go to a trial. You see Fidel angry with me. No one's ever taken him on. I mean, Mike Wallace was hostile and didn't get anything out of Fidel. Neither did Barbara Walters. She was friendly. I made a friend.
It's not a question of being hostile. I mean, I interview people all the time, and hostility isn't the thing, but being rigorous and challenging is the thing. And when I see you with Chavez, and you have a long series of talks with Chavez, but you don't raise with him very pressing questions, which one can pick up from all sorts of human rights reports about his human rights record.
Well, again, I'm going to have to, I hate to be so contentious, but we have to go specifically on the human rights record, and we have to go bit by bit, license by license, and he has a very good record. And the person who wrote the documentary with me was Tariq Ali and Mark Weisbrot, who works for the Center of Economic Policy and Research. Mark knows about as much of South America, all countries, as anyone I know. He's researched the economies of these countries. He knows what Chavez has done. So when you talk about these two, you're putting the exception to the rule. You're bringing out two men.
Well,
no one's perfect. They have, but compared
relatively
to the region, to the whole region.
When you're with Chavez and you read the reports like me from Reporters Without Borders and the International Committee to Protect Journalists, who talk about, quote, a climate of fear and self-censorship, 191 attacks recorded in 2009 on journalists, 2 journalists killed, the UN Special Rapporteur on independence of judiciary is saying...
Let me put it this way to you. I would hate to be a journalist in Guatemala trying to do... And the journalists in Venezuela... let's just say, to make a long story short, that 80% of the media is totally against Chavez, and it's privately owned. These are rich people who own the media. Historically, the media in Venezuela has been a political force. It is much more so than in America. What Chavez has done has bring extreme poverty to an end. He has sanitized, he's educated, he's brought health. He's changed the country. He's brought the resources of the country, including oil, to the people.
Sure, but in your movies you refuse generally, certainly when you're looking at American politics, to engage in sort of the black and the white, to see people as all good.
No, on the contrary. I was criticized for being empathetic to Bush when I did the Bush movie, and I couldn't despise a man more than George Bush.
But I come back to just basic facts as reported by Venezuelan Program of Action and Education on Human Rights, for example. 205 deaths, they say, as a result of security force action in Venezuela in the year 08-09.
I would like to check that out. That is the first I've heard of it, frankly, and I would love to go to Mark because he's an expert on this. I'm not. I could say in Colombia, how many paramilitary deaths have occurred? How many labor union leaders have been killed? And dressed up in uniforms as if they were FARC guerrillas. I mean, there's so many abuses in Colombia next door. Guatemala, through the years. Nicaragua. America goes into Nicaragua and it commits a terror campaign, killing some 100,000 Nicaraguans, devastating the economy. Salvador, I was in Salvador. Part of the reason I got activated again was I came back from Vietnam and I forgot about all the horrors of that. And I went down to Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua in 1980 when Reagan came in office, and I saw another side of America. We were militarizing the region. We were fighting these legitimate countries, legitimate governments like the Sandinistas in Nicaragua.
But it's not black and white, is it? America bad, Latin American leaders who stand up to America always good.
Well, in Latin America, America hasn't been very helpful. I mean, we have contributed money, but at the same time, we've impoverished the region. We've made it into one of the poorest developing countries in the world.
How far do you take your determination to sort of review American history? You've got this project, I think you call it The Secret History of America, which you're making for the Showtime channel in the United States.
And for Fremantle abroad.
And you say, and again this is a quote that you came up with not so long ago, you said, you cannot in history judge people just as good or bad. Hitler, you said, for example, he's an easy scapegoat and he's been used cheaply. And what you want to do, you say, is in this history of the 20th century, you want to walk in Stalin and Hitler's shoes to make sense of it.
Yeah, I love your research department. They did a good job. Those are two of the most sensitive quotes I've ever.
Yeah, and I wonder what you mean. I wonder what you mean by Hitler being an easy scapegoat, and that there are no people who are just good or bad.
I would change it. I would probably phrase it differently. Here's what I was trying to say. I'm saying, look, in the history of the United States, the secret history, which is known but been forgotten, cause and effect must always apply. Hitler is no doubt a monster. He's a Frankenstein. But there is a Dr. Frankenstein. He couldn't have come about by himself.
Sure, but there's no good side to Hitler.
None. No, because he was a madman and a psychopath. And if you read Mein Kampf, you see where his battle lay. He wanted Lebensraum. He wanted the East, the living space. He killed more Russians in the end and Slavic peoples than he did Jews or Gypsies. He killed 20 to 25 million Russians.
So even the controversialist Oliver Stone is not going to make a history of the 20th century which suggests that Hitler's been misunderstood.
No, of course not. I'm going into the facts. But, you know, there's a larger story than simply the Holocaust. There's another big Holocaust that's going on. And by the way, I'm going to get into that in the series. Where does Hitler come from? He comes from World War I. And I think World War I is the mother, and the Russian Revolution is the mother of this century. And I think we have to examine those two phenomena to understand where Hitler comes from, as well as Stalin.
I want to end the interview by bringing it back to pretty much where we began, in the United States. Do you think the American public, and partly I guess I'm talking about the people who finance movies and films and documentaries, is America ready to listen anymore to Oliver Stone?
Well, that's a good question. Look, I can only make an effort. You make movies to the best of your ability and make them exciting. I think Wall Street 2 is exciting, and people don't care. You know, they want to see excitement. I mean, they're not about necessarily getting a lesson. They don't go to movies for that. But when you make a documentary, yeah, I am challenging. I'm learning, and before I die, I hope to put something on film, because I'm so sick and tired of this American ethnocentricity in our documentaries and in our films. I've seen it for years. Platoon was a small cry against that, to say, wake up to what happened in Vietnam. We were fighting ourselves. We destroyed this country.
Are you, in some ways, profoundly out of love with your own country?
In some ways, yeah, sure. I think our foreign policy, especially in some of our domestic policies, are erroneous, and they have been erroneous since World War II. I think it was a different country before the war, and I think that the war, because we had the bomb, and because we had this singular power, economic and military, we changed. And that's what we're charting in this 10-hour documentary, The Secret History.
And Obama, and the rise of Barack Obama hasn't changed?
I'm very hopeful. You know, I'd love to believe. Listen, Kennedy was a product of this economic imperialism. He changed in office, and that's one of the issues that I brought up in JFK. I was laughed at the time, but now a lot of people have come out and said, yeah, Kennedy was trying to get out of Vietnam. He was making a deal with Cuba. He was reaching a détente with Nikita Khrushchev. Khrushchev-Kennedy thing is one of the most interesting, fascinating moments. It was like Gorbachev-Reagan years later. That was denied at the time my movie came out. Now it's being discussed. So the same thing is true. I mean, America has to deal with the past. Past is prologue. If we don't remember, we are condemned to the tyranny of now. And we will always be reacting to the 9/11s and all the immediate things that happen, and we'll be running around and we'll be making huge mistakes and committing our resources to wars in Afghanistan and Iraq that need not be.
Oliver Stone, thank you very much for being on Hardtalk. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.